Hello, I'm John Bland. I'm a Christadelphian, and I'm a member of the Stockport Christadelphian Ecclesia. We're going to be thinking today about John 8:58. This is a verse which reads from the New King James Version. Jesus said to them, "Most assuredly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am." And this is taken by some to mean that Jesus is God. The question of who Jesus was perplexed and confused people in Jesus' day, and indeed it has continued to perplex and confuse people ever since. The Gospel of John was actually written to try to avoid this confusion, something that John tells us at the end of his Gospel in John chapter 20 and verse 31, where we read, "But these things are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing you may have life in his name." So this is telling us that Jesus is not God. It's also telling us that Jesus is not just a man. It's a very specific expression which we need to pay attention to. It says that Jesus is the Son of God, and elsewhere indeed we're also told that he is the Son of Man. So the first thing we need to just think about is, how is it that the first verse that we looked at, John 8:58, is taken to mean that Jesus is God? Well, that's because the end of that verse contains these two words, "I am." And this is taken to be a specific Hebrew expression of the name of God. But the Hebrew expression is actually not there. It's not there in the Greek New Testament. And every other occasion in which this expression occurs, "I am," it is never read in that way. What's worth of note is that other Hebrew words do appear in the Greek New Testament. So, for example, Jesus himself uses words like rabbi or Abba. Those are Hebrew words which are left in the original, and then their meaning is actually explained. So if this was the original Hebrew expression for the name of God, you would anticipate that it would have been presented as is, and then it would have been explained. Another example of that is the word for Satan, which is a Hebrew word, which is not translated but left in the original. So there's no reason to assume that this is the original Hebrew expression, which only in one case in the Old Testament is the name of God. And indeed, if we look at Matthew chapter 22 and verses 31 and 32, we do see the expression here, "I am," about God, but it is actually not understood nor translated in this way. So in Matthew 22, verses 31 and 32, we read, "But concerning the resurrection of the dead, have you not read what was spoken to you by God, saying," and then this is now a quote from Exodus chapter 3, "I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. God is not the God of the dead, but of the living." So this sentence starts with this expression, "I am," but that is not taken to be the memorial name of God in any way. It is just the simple Greek words, "I am," even though it is applied about God. Now, some people in Jesus' day thought that he was God. So how did Jesus deal with that? This is taken from a few chapters earlier in the Gospel of John, John chapter 5, verses 18, where we read, "Therefore the Jews sought all the more to kill him, because he not only broke the Sabbath, but he also said that God was his Father, making himself equal with God, or the same as God." So that's what some people were looking at doing to him, to kill him, because he was claiming to be equal to God. The next verse, though, Jesus corrects this. In verse 19 of chapter 5, we read, "Then Jesus answered them and said to them, Most assuredly, I say to you, the Son can do nothing of himself, but what he sees the Father do. For whatever he does, the Son also does in like manner." That makes it very clear that Jesus and God are separate entities, and it makes it very clear that Jesus is subordinate to God. So when accused of being equal to God, he answers by saying, effectively, "No, I'm not." Equally, some people thought that Jesus was just a man. We read about that in John chapter 7, for example, where in verse 15 we read, "And the Jews marveled, saying, How does this man know letters, never having studied?" So how does Jesus respond in this situation when he's accused of being just simply a man? Well, verses 16 to 18 of John chapter 7, which are the following verses, Jesus says as follows. Jesus answered them and said, "My doctrine is not mine, but his who sent me. If anyone wills to do his will, he shall know concerning the doctrine whether it is from God, or whether I speak on my own authority. He who speaks from himself seeks his own glory, but he who speaks the glory of the one who sent him is true, and no unrighteousness is in him." So when he's assumed to be just a man, he has to point out that no, that's not the case either. It's not me that's speaking. I am speaking the words of God who sent me. And the same indeed is the case in John chapter 8, early in the very chapter we're talking about today, where in verse 41 we read, "Then they," that's the Jews, "said to him, 'We were not born of fornication. We have one Father, God.'" And here they clearly know his background. They know that his father was not his biological father. They know that he was conceived in fornication, as they understood it to be. So how does Jesus respond in that situation when he's accused of being, again, just a man? Verse 42, Jesus said to them, "If God were your father, you would love me, for I proceed forth and came from God. Nor have I come of myself, but he sent me. Why do you not understand my speech? Because you're not able to listen to my word." So Jesus is clearly saying here, I am not just a man. I have come from God. God sent me. I have God's words. So Jesus is not God. Jesus is not just a man. Jesus is the Son of God and also the Son of Man. And John 8:58 is simply a statement about his place in God's thinking and God's planning. He was thought of and conceptually conceived before Abraham. Thanks for listening.